Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is Shontell Smith, the partner and head of the New York practice at Tusk Strategies. Shontell, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
There is a lot to discuss, a lot to parse through when it comes to President Trump's first State of the Union address of his second term. And it was historic in terms of just how long it was. It broke records, being the longest State of the Union address of all time, clocked in at 1 hour and 48 minutes. But the speech does come as most Americans, according to recent polling, think the country's on the wrong track, disapprove of the president's performance, and have negative views on the economy. So to start off the conversation, what are some of your takeaways from the speech?
So, you can't have a hit television show on NBC for years and not know how to do a production. I thought President Trump did a masterclass in terms of changing the narrative of some of the discussion prior to his State of the Union. A lot of people wanted to know what new policies he was going to drop. Was he going to explain some of his polling or some of his decision making? Because a lot of people for the past couple of weeks have alleged that the president's behavior is erratic. Some of his decisions, like to deal with international affairs, the tariffs, there was just a lot of going on, and people were concerned in terms of how the president was behaving and how the president was basically governing United States. And what he did yesterday was show people a calm, steady-handed president who could talk about his accomplishments over the past year, even though it may not be grounded in much reality. He did present a positive America for the people watching.
Before we talk about what happened during the speech, I want to talk about who wasn't at the speech, and that was over 24 Democratic lawmakers. They skipped the State of the Union for the People's State of the Union, and that was a rally that was billed as, quote, counter-programming President Trump's night full of lies and misplaced priorities for the American people. One of the speakers there was Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, and during his remarks, he said that the reason he wasn't at the State of the Union and the reason he skipped was because, quote, these are not normal times and Democrats have to stop behaving normally. What do you make of that and the Democrats who ended up skipping the State of the Union?
So I'm torn on this. Who's watching the State of the Union? I think the core base, their core, they're not watching it. I think the people that are watching the State of the Union are independents, maybe some undecideds, and people who want to just see. I think the Democrats that were at the State of the Union yesterday, some of them, especially at one point, I think when he was talking about Somalian people and murders in the United States and corruption, they were yelling and booing and disrupting the State of the Union. Yes, it's not ordinary times. We're going through unprecedented change under this president. However, you can't skip a function and then not have a real plan to take back the House, to have a heir apparent so Democrats are united next presidential run. Like, it was theatrics, and I just don't know what you gain out of it. American people want you to do your job. Sometimes your job is going to places and being in situations you don't want. If Democrats are going to say we're not going to go and this is malarkey, then fine. But what is your solution and what is the path to victory for the House and Senate?
Top issues facing Americans continue to be the economy, the cost of living, immigration in general. So I'm curious, when you're listening to President Trump's speech last night, how adequately do you think he addressed those issues?
So he did address the immigration. He brought the victims of people who were the family members whose relatives were murdered, whether through, as he would say, undocumented immigrants, or he also talked about how the border is the safest it's ever been. This is the safest in the history of the country the border has ever been. They've kicked more bad guys out. In terms of affordability, he did talk about what he claimed he inherited from the Biden-Harris presidency, which was high inflation, high interest rates for housing, and basically a lack of affordability. He alleges he was the one that made the word affordability a thing, because that's what he ran on. Do I think he did a good job explaining how people's pockets, I think it was two realities. He was saying, gas is the lowest it's ever been. He said, I think he said, he quoted, I think, $1.60, which I've yet to see gas for $1.60, but maybe in some places in the United States it is. He also talked about grocery prices, energy costs, and gas, and he's saying it's the lowest. I don't think that's what Americans are seeing every day when they open up their pocketbooks and they pay their bills. I think they're seeing higher costs, higher energy costs, higher gas costs, higher food costs, and some people speculate Americans are paying, I think they said, about 1,700 extra due to his tariffs. So he's saying it's cheap in America, but that's not what Americans are feeling right now. Many people are feeling the crunch.
To that point, he said the economy's roaring back like never before. I doubt if you went on the street, too many Americans would say, oh, I feel that roar of the economy. I feel like my dollar goes further now than it did last year. I mean, it's actually, polling says it's the opposite. People have this really bleak outlook when it comes to the economy. And affordability really seems like that football politically, right?
Right.
Republicans last year said it's Democrats' fault. Now it's Republicans' fault. President Trump said, hey, this is on Democrats. They started this affordability problem. It's their fault. What do you make of his kind of blame game there?
This is the problem. I think whenever Americans are feeling uneasy about their pocketbooks, whoever is in power gets the blame. It doesn't matter what happened before him because when he ran for president, he said once elected, I will do X, Y, and Z. He never said, well, the Biden-Harris administration left me with a mess. He said, I will do this day one. Day one, grocery prices will go down. Day one, I am the president, I will cut interest rates. He sold himself on this. And I think unfortunately, whenever we're in I don't want to say recession, but just where people are feeling uncomfortable, they always get the blame, whoever's in power. So if I'm Republicans, I don't think I focus on the blame game. I focus on solutions. Some say the president's actions are the reason why we're having this affordability price issue. Healthcare is going to go up. That's because of the big, beautiful bill. Prices are going up. Some would say because of tariffs. So it's hard to do the blame game when there were some actions that some economists say are the reason for people's uncomfortability with money right now.
I want to talk about immigration because one of the most contentious moments of the night happened when he was talking about immigration, and it seemed like he wanted to get this difference between Democrats and Republicans on the record because he invited all the attendees to stand if they agreed, quote, the first duty of the American government is to protect American citizens, not illegal aliens. And Democrats didn't stand up. Then he was going on saying, look, they're not standing up. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar repeatedly shouted, you have killed Americans, while he was then ripping sanctuary cities. What did you make of that moment?
Um, you know, as just someone watching, it didn't really, it's the president who's a Republican telling Democrats stand up for what he believes in. I don't believe that the Democrats don't believe in keeping Americans safe. I think everybody knows there's different manners in which they want to keep Americans safe. I think the shouting and the back and forth, that's what Trump wants. That's what the president wants. He wants you to create a scene so he can, basically reprimand you on national television because nobody does it best. He is a TV producer. I think the Democrats in that situation fell into his lap, unfortunately. I think it didn't look good. And you have to remember who is watching this. It's your undecideds and your independents. And those are the people you need to win, whether it's the House, whether it's Congress, whether it's presidency, the independents and the unknowns. Those are the people you need to focus on. You already have your base. So I just think when people watch that, they're like, wasn't the best moment. But then I think they also know it's political gamesmanship.
To that point, if you're an independent, if you're an undecided, you're watching this, is the needle moving for you, in your opinion, anyway when it comes to the midterms?
I think they may have been moved last night, but then I think when they woke up and saw people's responses to his address, I think then they were like, okay, because what the president does is he presents his version of America. And I think then once fact checking comes into play and people actually say, hey, this is inflation, This is the rate that jobs grew the past couple of months under the presidency. This is how much, things are costing now versus a year ago. I think then reality sets in and they're realizing maybe everything he said wasn't true. So I think last night they were moved. Today, I don't know if they're moved. I think they're just absorbing and seeing, let's see how much, like what else happens in the next coming months.
And then from the perspective of a Democratic strategist, I mean, how do you take this as a Democrat in terms of the midterms? Because we saw a group that didn't go, a group that was shouting back and fighting, some left mid-speech, and then a group that you saw whenever they panned to the Democrats, they're just sitting there looking a little sullen, looking a little stoic. Like, where do you go from there?
I don't know, and this is the problem that the Democrats have right now. They are a party divided. They have many different ways that they want to achieve their goal, but I don't think they have coalesced around the manner in which they will achieve their goals. Look, this is prime time for Democrats. There's an affordability crisis. People are feeling it in their pockets, and I think the American people are a little on edge about some of the decision making of the president. How do Democrats respond? They haven't responded. You can't scream into a microphone. You got to find ways to legislate and get people involved so there can be change come the midterms. Right now, we have different people possibly for president, and obviously it's 3 years away, but you want the party to be coalesced. You want the party to have a strategy, a cohesive strategy, I think, on how to do the midterms. And I have not seen it. As a strategist, there has to be a coming to Jesus point, and I think we're at that point. Elections are next year. Like, I mean, not next year, like they're later this year. We have to figure out what's the way we're going to govern and how. They haven't. That's leadership. That's what these organizations should be doing. That's what the minority leaders should be doing. That's what the minorities, I mean, that's what Hakeem Jeffries should be doing. We're not seeing that. So at some point, the party has to figure out how to fight in a way that can touch a majority of Americans.
I want to talk about potentially the most thankless job of the night and potentially in politics overall, and that is the response to the State of the Union. Because I think best case scenario for you is if you do a good job, no one really remembers it, right? And if you do a bad job, like you'll probably be made fun of on SNL. Katie Britt remembers that from 2024. We remember the water bottle moment from Marco Rubio, Joe Kennedy and the chapstick. And then if you do a good job, you're not on that list. No one's really remembering. But during her speech, she posed 3 questions. She said, is the president working to make life more affordable for you and your family? Is the president working to keep Americans safe, both at home and abroad? Is the president working for you? What did you make of her speech?
For the first time, so I don't have much. I did not have much knowledge of the Virginia governor. I know that she won recently, ran on affordability. People seem to like her. Didn't even know what she looked like. For the first time, I was engaged. I was very engaged in her. I thought starting it off with those 3 questions was a way to just captivate whoever was watching the rebuttal. And for me, it was like, those were 3 good questions to ask yourself about this president. And if you asked it honestly, you don't come away with a clear, like, yes. You come away with like, is he really working for me abroad? A lot of Americans question that. Is it more affordable? A lot of Americans question that. So I thought her messaging was the proper messaging for the night. I thought her presentation was well. I actually thought she was captivating. For people who didn't know her, I definitely think she might be a rising star because I actually wrote those 3 questions down, and I was like, she made the argument, and I thought the rebuttal was well put together.
And then my last point I want to bring up are some things that weren't mentioned at all in that hour and 48-minute long speech. That was the Epstein files and anything about that, as well as the 2 Americans who were killed by federal agents in Minneapolis last month, Alex Preddy and Renee Good. What do you make of those omissions last night?
I thought they were intentional omissions. It was unfortunate. I saw Nancy Pelosi on TV after, and I guess some of the Democrats were wearing white pins saying, release the files. I think the Epstein file, I went down a rabbit hole this weekend watching Netflix on the Epstein files. I think Epstein and the files and the fact that President Trump is in the files, the fact that the files aren't released, and there's so much cloudiness. Even his own base is annoyed with this. Was it a missed opportunity? Yes, but what was he going to say? I am sure there are some unflattering things in the Epstein files. If he releases it, he's going to implicate himself in something. It's going to become a bigger scandal. So I think on that part, it was okay that he didn't mention it. It's not okay, but I think for him politically, it was smart not to mention it. Now, the two Americans that died, you can't be a patriot because if you watched last night, it was all about America. We had the hockey team coming, talking about the World Cup and how much winning America is doing. But you can't be a true American and be okay with two Americans dying. And I think that was a missed opportunity because I think there's some people that's like, whether you agree with what they were doing that, prompted, the escalation between them and ICE, still Americans were killed. Innocent Americans were killed because they weren't committing a crime. Whatever they were doing, it wasn't a crime. And I think he missed an opportunity to show compassion. I think he missed an opportunity to say, hey, maybe, we needed to right step. But this is President Trump. He doesn't really admit when he's wrong, and he's not very bashful. So I thought for the independent people who were unsure and went to see compassion from their president, that was a missed opportunity.
And when you think about State of the Union addresses overall, I think in modern history, I can think of three moments that were memorable. One, the Republican congressman yelling at Obama, saying you lie. Another one, Nancy Pelosi ripping up this speech. Last year, not last year, wow, it's 2026. In 2024, President Biden showing up and he exceeded expectations for him. And people said, look, no, he's very energetic. He's not old. He's not too old. He's not too cognitively impaired to run for president again. But when you're thinking about this State of the Union, do you think this will go down as what was the most memorable moment, or does it kind of fade away?
I think it fades away. A lot of it, if you listened, unfortunately, the president was rambling at points, just rambling. And I think, it's memorable because, there were a lot of theatrics, Medal of Honors were awarded, people were chanting USA. It was a good show, but there wasn't anything that really was like, oh, that was memorable. I remember Nancy Pelosi being pissed and ripping up that paper right behind Trump. That was memorable. But there was nothing I thought, years from now would be like, remember that Trump State of the Union where X, Y, and Z happened. I think it was a great production, but I don't think there's anything memorable where 10 years from now we'll be discussing it. It's more than 10 years now that we're discussing Nancy Pelosi.
Well, there's certainly a lot to discuss, I think, between now and midterms when they come along. And I'm sure, and I hope, rather, that you come back on and break it down with me. Shontell, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.